Hello, my name is Mugabi Byenkya, and I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, to Ugandan parents. I currently live in Kampala, Uganda. I was able-bodied for the first 9 years of my life. When I was 9 years old, on February 16, 2001, I suffered from my first stroke. The stroke felt like the worst migraine that I had ever experienced in my life thus far. At that time, I had never experienced a migraine before, and so to me it just felt like the worst headache that I've ever experienced. But I later learned that it was a migraine. It felt as if two sledgehammers were pounding into my temples in sync with my heartbeat, and it was excruciatingly painful, and I didn't know what was going on. And so I was at a event at my school at the time where I was playing with my friends, and I felt the migraine coming on, and I didn't know what to do, and so I just decided to tough it out because I had heard my mother, who was a nurse, talk about the dangers of over-medicating, and so I didn't want to turn to medication, and so I said, I can just tough this out and, I'll be fine. And so on the ride back home, the sledgehammers and the pounding just got even more intense, and it was very, very excruciating to deal with, but I felt that I could tough it out. And when I got back home, I was playing a board game with my brothers and a friend of theirs, and while we were playing the board game, they forgot whose turn it was to play. And I tried telling them that it was their friend Nadine's turn, and I kept on repeating, it's Nadine's turn, it's Nadine's turn, it's Nadine's turn. But I realized that no sound was actually coming out of my mouth. I had a condition that they call aphasia, which has kept up with me throughout my life, where you think you're vocalizing, or you have troubles with processing text, or with actually forming speech. And so what was actually coming out of my mouth was like that awkward croaking sound, instead of the it's Nadine's turn that my mind was signaling to my body to communicate. And so I broke down in tears because I realized that I had lost my ability to speak. My brothers rushed to my mother. My mother gave me some medication, put me in bed for a nap, took me to the doctors. The doctors hooked me up to an IV. They misdiagnosed me as having dehydration because they said that I was running around playing with my friends on a hot sunny day. But then the following week at school, I noticed that I was no longer the number one at handwriting, which was my claim to fame at the time. And my right hand wasn't moving in the ways that it used to be able to. And my mother noticed that my right hand was curled up in a position that it was not normally. It was curled up like this instead of being fully extended, and I was walking with a limp. And so my mother took me for further evaluation, and at this further evaluation they determined that I had had a stroke. And the stroke got progressively worse over time. I went from being able to write slowly to completely losing all ability with my right side of my body, to it being completely paralyzed. And so I was put under intensive physical therapy. I had to learn how to do everything with my left hand and left side of my body, brushing my teeth, washing, the dishes, writing, eating, every basic thing that you could think of. I had to learn how to do with the left side of my body, which was a challenge. It was very difficult because my right side used to be my dominant side of the body, and learning how to do everything again with the left side of your body, not by choice but by force, was a very difficult challenge. But I managed to keep up academically in school, and I faced some ostracization from my peers because I had become disabled, and I now, presented differently. I moved through the world differently. I was no longer allowed to participate in physical education or sports, which is a large part of boyhood and is what athleticism, boyhood centers around. And so that was difficult because doctors didn't allow me to do any rigorous physical activity outside of physical therapy. And so I went to the library instead, and I just read a lot of books and escaped into those worlds, and which was a great escape for me, but it was also an isolating experience, being one of the only disabled children at the school and not having people who could relate to my particular experience, but just the disabled experience in general as well. And so I went through a lot of physical therapy, and the physical therapists drilled into me that I could get to the point where I could gain the full functioning back of my right side of my body, which I now realize was a hope that they had for me, but that wasn't realistic. I have never been able to gain the full functioning of the right side of my body. My right hand still lacks fine motor control, as does my right leg, and that is something that I'll have to likely deal with for the rest of my life. And if the physical therapist had told me this earlier, I feel like it would have been a better process of acceptance, rather than it being like I got the sense that I wasn't trying hard enough, and I tried harder and harder and harder and pushed myself harder and harder and harder, and things just weren't clicking, things just weren't working. And so that was a significant challenge. And so I managed as well as I could. My family were very supportive during this time. They tried to, modify the chores that I had at home to make sure that I was still a part of the household, to make sure that I wasn't being, given any treatment that was different from the rest of my siblings, which I appreciated. My siblings looked out for me at school. They would, stand up to bullies and stand up to people who were mistreating me because of my disabilities. And they were very supportive, but they didn't understand what I was going through. Nobody really did, because I had haven't really encountered anybody who has had a stroke at such a young age. But eventually, with intensive physical therapy, I was able to get to the point where I could at least use my right hand for limited mobility. As you can see now, I can stretch it out, which is a significant improvement from where I was at. I can split my fingers. I still lack the fine motor control to fully grasp objects, but I can hold things. Same thing with my left leg, with my right leg, sorry. I can walk, and walking used to be very, very difficult for me. And I was on an upwards trajectory, and things were looking up. And then I went to university, and after university, I was awarded a full scholarship from university, and so that was an amazing blessing. And after university, I was awarded a fellowship from my master's program. And it was after the first semester of my master's program that I suffered 2 more strokes within 1 week of each other. And these strokes gave me a whole new set of disabilities. The first strokes, in addition to the paralysis, they also gave me a migraine disorder, which was difficult to manage, photophobia, which is sensitivity to harsh lights, and hyperacusis, which is a sensitivity to harsh noises. And so the second and third strokes amplified those. The photophobia became even worse. The hyperacusis became even worse. I now have a chronic headache, which is a headache that never goes away. And I also have insomnia, depression, seizure disorder, chronic pain, which my whole body feels like it's on fire 24/7. Feels like it's on fire right now. And that pain never goes away. Chronic fatigue, which means I'm exhausted all the time. I'm exhausted right now, and that never goes away. And these new set of disabilities forced me to take a leave of absence from my master's program, because I couldn't continue my master's program when I didn't know what would trigger a seizure, and the slightest thing would trigger a seizure, from physical to mental or emotional or even social exertion. Something as simple as responding to a text might trigger a seizure. Something as simple as trying to write out a document might trigger a seizure. Something as simple as socializing and being around people for extended periods of time might trigger a seizure. And so it was a very difficult time during my life when I was on an upward trajectory, and then all of a sudden I had another setback. And this was something that the doctors had warned me about. They had warned me that I was basically, there was a high risk of me having another stroke, since I'd had one when I was so young.